Hey everybody, Mr. Bruss here. I just wanted to do a recap of virtual day number 3 for the ecology unit for freshman biology. So we had a great day today and we started really diving into a little bit of the content that's going to end up being on the test, which is going to be on Wednesday, September 30th, which students are going to do online. But I just wanted to go through a little bit of what we talked about today in class. So I'm going to share my screen here and I'm going to share the presentation that students saw today in class. So I'll hit present here. Can I hit it to present? There we go. Oops, I'm gonna have to go all the way back to the beginning here. Oh, maybe we can do that a little bit of a more elegant way. All right, let's try this now. All right, so here we are. Ecology unit virtual day number 3. So we started off like we're going to do every day now. We kind of flipped the order a little bit to start with graph of the day. We started talking about what do we notice about this graph? A lot of students noticed that there's a mushroom there, some fungus. They noticed that there's some interesting things that seem to be going into the kind of roots of the fungus here. And we kind of wondered, what did this mean here? Why is these different waste kind of arrows pointed at the roots of this fungus? And then we had some brave souls explain that they thought that maybe this mushroom here, this fungus, is going to be used to detoxify mining waste, biomedical waste, agricultural waste. And indeed, they're correct. There are some really amazing researchers looking into the role that fungus can play in providing an indicator of how our climate is changing, as well as a resource to help detoxify some of the waste we're producing. We talked about how mushrooms are decomposers and help to complete the cycle of some of the food chains that we're going to be learning about. I had students pause for one quick second, reminded them that iCloud is not working for students and that they're going to have to save files onto their iPad locally on their iPad. And I'll try to make a video to remind that, but I think some students are understanding how that works to be able to submit them for Canvas. We also discussed how we had originally hoped with planning these virtual units that we would give students an option, test or project, and that students could pick the one that worked best for them. We started thinking with the time crunch, the bio teachers met yesterday, with the limited time, kind of the limited resources, the limited ability to kind of guide students along on the project, was going to take away from helping students that wanted to take the test. And we felt like we were spread a little too thin and we were not going to be able to provide students with the best sort of educational experience. So we kind of decided that we're just going to have the test as an option and that we're going to focus our energies on helping students prepare for that test and providing them resources so that they can really learn this stuff and then demonstrate what they know on the test. So after that, we promised we got these students taken care of. We're going to be providing the resources. Of course, we're not taking the test for you. So you're going to have to access them and study them, but we'll provide the resources and we'll provide a very clear direction as to what we're going to be asking on the test. Then we kind of came back to our graph of the day here, and we reminded ourselves about this graph and these fungus and the mushrooms. And who thought that? I know fungus existed. I know they were decomposers. I know we had a problem with toxic waste, but I never connected the two. I never thought that these two could work together, and we could kind of cure some of the toxic waste that humans produce with an environmental, with a organism, like a natural organism. However, there are some smart people that are thinking about this. And one of those is Dr. Adriana Romero Olivares. And we learned a little bit about Dr. Romero Olivares, where she studied, where she works now. We watched a little video where she talks about this huge, massive 3 football field wide, actually single individual organism that is a fungus. And while it takes up this entire space, it's just one organism. So we mentioned a little about biomass. And sometimes that's a more useful term when we're talking about ecology and ecosystems and the organization of ecosystems. Sometimes it's a little bit more useful to talk about the mass, the total amount of this organism that's there rather than individual organisms, because you have these crazy large mushrooms that don't really that wouldn't represent as a number of different organisms. We directed another talk that Dr. Romero Olivares, that she spoke with this blogger, and they had a nice conversation. You can learn a little bit more about her work. And we mentioned that another researcher, Dr. Stamets, is looking at how fungus can be used to clean up oil spills. So really related, we talked about these fungus decomposers, how humans are interacting with the environment, and how we can live in it sustainably. And that really led into the content for the day. And so the objectives for the day is, what is an ecosystem? And the I can statement is, students will be able to identify different components of an ecosystem. And sometimes to understand what something is, a picture can do a lot of, can be really helpful in that. And here's a picture of an ecosystem here. There's another picture of an ecosystem. And even that, this city is an ecosystem. And we're going to learn more about why all of these things represent ecosystems. In addition, we're going to discuss, why are we studying this stuff anyways? Why are we taking the time in class to learn about ecology? And what is the role that humans play in our ecosystem? And at the end of this, we're leading into tomorrow's content, is, how do scientists think of and organize ecosystems so that we can better study them and understand them? And we mentioned that this stuff that I'm talking about right now is not directly going to be on the test. No, not yet. It's not going to be on the test. However, it forms the sort of scaffolding for which we can add more detail and more structure to our concept. So while it's not directly tested, it's an important concept to know so we can put the other material we're learning in context. So ecology, that's the study of how living things interact with each other and the environment. We see two living things here, each of which are interacting with the environment. The bear kind of wading through the river here, and this fish kind of making its way upstream, both interacting with the environment. And it looks, based on this picture, that they're going to be interacting with each other relatively soon. We broke down this word of ecology, so eco referring to the environment, and ology to study something. So we talked about astrology, the study of the stars, ophthalmology, study of the eyes, right? And biology, the study of things that are living, biology. So then we kind of reached out to the students, and why do we care? Why are we studying this in class? And this was ecology graded practice number 2. Students thought about this, and students had some great ideas why we're studying this. Learn about our place in the world, learn how we can interact with the environment sustainably, just learn more about the things that are in our world around us. So there are some great answers that students were giving for that. Then we reflected on graded ecology graded practice number 1, where we learned a little bit about humans' impact on the environment. And students kind of shared out in the chat and through over the audio about kind of things that were surprising to them, things that they recognized, things that they'd like to change about what they learned from this interactive activity about how humans have impacted the environment. And we kind of left it with a little positive note, with a note of positivity, where we're really close. It doesn't take a lot, and we can make some changes and really live in this environment sustainably. Okay, so when we are talking about the environment or living things in it, what are we talking about? So what we asked the students, what living things can you see or not see now? So we looked outside, in your room, what living things, trees, plants, all came up. Does anyone have any carnivores in their house, right? Some people had some cats in their house. Some people named themselves as carnivores. What about herbivores, things that eat plants? And I mentioned that I have a little mouse that seems to be living in my house that we named Remy. That he seems to be an herbivore living that I could see in my house. And then was anything living that you cannot see? So when we looked out the window, we know that there's probably some squirrels out there, birds, insects, bees. And then the other one that came up is bacteria. Yeah, there's a lot of bacteria around that we can't see that represent a lot of the living things around us. We then talked about that all these living things are known as biotic factors. So biotic factor means it's alive. And then we started having students think about the things that are not living that are important to the environment. And they hit all right on things. Oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen in the air, water, the temperature, and that big glowing orb of an abiotic factor, the sun, and how that's important. So students hit on all those topics right there. Then we asked, if living things are biotic, what do we call non-living things? Students had some great answers. They hit non-biotic, unbiotic, yeah, all these kind of prefixes that mean not. And then we learned that when we're talking about it in ecology, we call those abiotic factors. And we listed some of those abiotic factors right here, available right there. And then we talked about a meaning not, so amnesia, unable to remember, apathetic, not caring, asocial, not social, apolitical, atheist, amorphous, and atom. A lot of people didn't know that, but tom comes from cut, and when they originally were researching the atom, scientists thought that was the smallest particle that made up all living things, and you couldn't cut it any further, so atom. Could not be cut, atom. Then we reflected back on that one of the most important biotic factors in our ecosystem on Earth is the sun, and it is the original source of all the energy of the ecosystems on Earth. And we made sure students took a good note on this. And we showed them, while they haven't had to work with food chains just yet, that's going to be part of the homework today. And we're going to be getting really knowledgeable about how to construct and interpret food chains. And we noticed that the sun is the major source of energy that goes into grass. And then the energy moves with these arrows along the food chain and eventually back after the decomposers break it down. And then we put this little symbol here that says, yeah, this is going to be on the test. You'll have to know that the sun is the original source of all energy on Earth and in the ecosystems. Then we broke down, we said the biotic and abiotic factors are necessary for an ecosystem. The living and non-living things are necessary for an ecosystem. So what is an ecosystem? Well, eco we had seen before in ecology is referring to the environment. And then my little joke here with my original Nintendo Entertainment System, is that what we meant? Well, kind of. I mean, it is a system. It has interacting parts for a greater whole. But sometimes maybe this Rube Goldberg machine or this Rube Goldberg system kind of gets added a little bit more, where it's a set of things working together in an interconnected environment. So an ecosystem is really the set of all things in an environment, living and non-living things that are interconnected, that relate to each other. And then we highlighted this word interconnected. Yeah, that's really important. And that is the main focus of why we are spending time studying ecosystems, that the role to understand that everything in the ecosystem is interconnected. So if you change one factor, living or non, introduce a species goes extinct. You change the flow of the river, you change the amount of sunlight that can come in. Any of these things have major effects all throughout all of the components of the ecosystem. And this interconnectedness is why simply reintroducing wolves to the national park, to Yellowstone National Park, took it from a place that looked like this, kind of bland, not much biodiversity, not many different species there, to when reintroducing wolves, brought it to something that looks like this, a lush environment, many different species interacting with each other, many different healthy species, simply by just introducing one species had this major effect. Then we talked about how, in fact, when the reintroduction of wolves to Yellowstone literally changed the route a river took. And this gets at this idea that there's an interaction between the living, the biotic, and the non-living, the abiotic factors. And I just showed this for students. We're not having them memorize this, but that how just simply reintroducing wolves in 1995 had all of these effects on all of these different species. And all of that came together to change the physical landscape of Yellowstone National Park. And so we watched this 4 or 5 minute video here that does a nice job of kind of telling that story of how the landscape and why the landscape changed with the reintroduction of wolves. So then to understand how things are related in ecosystems, scientists began developing ways of organizing how we think about ecosystems. And so that's today's homework. Ecology graded practice number 3. We're going to start learning about food chains and food pyramids. And yes, those concepts will be on the test. So I have it here. I'm not going to go through the Canvas. So I think students are pretty confident going through Canvas now that this is what ecology graded practice number 3 looks like. There's a couple of videos to explain introduction to a food chain. And then students get to make their own food chain by either writing names in these boxes or by putting pictures or both. And where are they going to make this food chain from? Well, they're going to look at this picture of the African savanna, pull out organisms from it, and construct them in an accurate food chain here. After they've done that, you can watch this next video that introduces kind of the names of the different levels in a food chain: producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and a decomposer, and show how those all interact to kind of make our food chain into a food cycle. Again, that's going to be based off of the African savanna here. Finally, students are going to see how you can also organize an ecosystem into this energy pyramid. And this goes by a number of different names: an energy pyramid, a food pyramid, a trophic pyramid. But students are going to understand a little bit more about why it's shaped in a pyramid and at what level different producers, primary consumers, and secondary consumers occupy. And then tomorrow, Wednesday in class, we're going to dive a little bit more into detail on this. So students we didn't go over this in class. The idea is this is going to be slightly flipped so students can kind of prime their brains by learning how these things work, and then be able to come back to class with some good questions tomorrow where we dive more deeply into this organization of ecosystems. So that was today's class. We did a lot on Tuesday, September 15th in class, and we're looking forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. So see you later.